Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's hybrid meeting and the presentation with the Los Alamos Mountaineers. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone is aware that the presentation is being recorded. I am Beth Courtwright, the Operations Manager at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEAC, here in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I will be the moderator for tonight's talk. I want to acknowledge first our wonderful members and donors, and especially our partners at the Mountaineers for all of your generous support and help over the years. For more details about PEAC programs, you can find us at peaknature.org. But if you registered, you're probably already there. So I'll pass it over to Tony to start the Mountaineers meeting.
Okay, everybody can hear me? Good, great. Okay, good evening. Welcome to the August Los Alamos Mountaineers program. I'm Tony Taylor. I'm the president of the Mountaineers. So just a couple of announcements before we get to our main presentation. We'd like folks to save the date for our annual Los Alamos Mountaineers Potpourri, which is on Wednesday, December 13th, and send topics for potential 10-minute talks to Juliana Fessenden. So then we will have our trip report and upcoming trips, and then our main presentation, which is Bicycle Adventures Around the World by Deniece Corsequa. I just want to end with announcing the Bear Festival, which is Saturday, August 26th, this upcoming Saturday, and we will have a booth for the Mountaineers there. So with that, I will hand it over to Jeff for the trip reports.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, we've had quite a few great trips this past month. Hidden Valley Lake Hike on July 29th. It was led by Bill Podorski. They had 5 participants with Bill, Boyd, Anita, and Ben, and Clarissa. Some nice folks from there. There's Boyd and some others doing some creek crossings there. We had a lovely Skinner Hut trip, July 30th to August 2nd, led by Kathleen Grutzmacher. We had 10 participants. This is a view looking south from the hut to the Continental Divide, that's actually the ridge that connects to Mount Massive in the background there. This is one of our common meals, appetizers before the main dinner in the hut. This was a great trail. This was the first railroad that they had built where they had a tunnel that goes underneath the Continental Divide to connect the Front Range back to mining towns on the other side of the Continental Divide. And that rail, they built that in the, I want to say the late 1800s maybe. And it's now a lovely, easily graded bike trail and hiking trail, right? And so that was lovely to ride on. Here's a picture of the tunnel going into the tunnel. Still had a lot of snow captured in there. And this tunnel, they spent all this money, and then they do these big switchbacks that they built on these wooden trestles. They pulled out all the metal and all the wood and reused it. This was only in use for about a year before it got superseded by 2 other rail lines and 2 other tunnels that had got put through the Continental Divide, very close to this location, actually. There's Tony on the ridge looking towards North Mount Massive. We did a day hike on that ridge, and a couple of us summited North Mount Massive. And there's Patty, and I can't tell who else is, and Kathleen. We had a number of lovely day hikes on this trip along the Continental Divide. And this is the Santa Fe Baldy trip on August 1st. I led that trip. We had 8 participants: Jeff, Charlie, John, Tim, Cindy, Claudia, Alan, Andrew. This is a picture of Charlie looking down on Lake Catherine, just on the east side of the summit. And there's a summit photo with our crew. We had lovely weather. It was just balmy once you got out of the wind on that east side. We stayed up there for probably 45 minutes or even an hour. Then we had the Gold Hill hike that Olivia Lee led on August 6th with Ron, Anita, Gustav, CK, and Olivia. This is a a picture of no gold, but copper in our hills. And so this is a summit photo on Gold Hill, trying to get out of the wind. They had some pretty fierce winds were reported on that trip. And then they did this lovely circuit where they followed the ridge to Lobo Peak. And if you haven't done that, I actually haven't done that myself, but I have done both Gold and Lobo separately, and that's a beautiful route with spectacular views both to the Latier Range to the north and all of Wheeler and that whole area to the south, and some old mining ruins from that trip. Then Gates of the Arctic, that trip, most of them are getting back today. So we'll report on that next month. Tanya Pietras led that, and I think they've got about 5 folks on that trip. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that and having picks for you next month. The Rubber Ducky trip, led by Gene Dewart this year. Thanks, Gene, for leading that. The water levels were too high in June, so they pushed it back to August 13th, and they had 6 participants: Sylvie, Jean, Cecile, Juliana, Holly, and Joe. And there's the crew as they're getting ready to launch. And then here's some more of the crew on the water. And then Norbert just recently led a very successful Colorado 14er weekend. And they had 10 participants. Olivia, Ron, and Tony summited Emerald Peak, which is a centennial peak. And then 6 folks summited Belford, and then 3 also summited, in addition to Belford, Oxford. So here's some of the crew at their camp area. There's the view of Emerald and Iowa peaks. There's the group on Emerald Summit. And then this is the return to camp. Looks like you guys had great weather and some great successful summits on that trip. And there's a sunrise picture. I think Michael Altair got up early to get up there and capture this one. Mm-hmm. And then we've also been having a successful resurgence of the Monday night Pajarito Ski Hill hikes. Ellen Mills has been leading most of these, and these have been lovely with many participants. This was just last night, actually. We had a good group with lots. These always have a good group and lots of great food. You will not lose weight on these hikes, I guarantee it. And so for future LA Mountaineers club trips and announcements. So, and I want to apologize that I hadn't been putting the Tuesday, Thursday top roping sessions, and sometimes they're also a weekend top roping session. I apologize for leaving those off the last couple of months, because those are really great opportunities to get out and climb. And then we have Gray's and Torrey's Peak coming up on August 23rd. Latier Peak Loop that I'm leading on August 27th. Middle Fork Salmon Raft Trip. Is Bill in the room? The last I heard, there were 3 openings, so there may still be availability for that trip, with music and fishing. Chuchis Peaks, I've canceled that trip because I've gotten word that the land grant is not being friendly to folks hiking through the land grant to get to the trailhead. They gated it all out, which has made it for a very long hike. But I thought, and in the past I've done it where you could park behind the gate and hike in, but apparently that is not being received in any way friendly right now. This is very controversial for the town of Chuchis and land grant members, and they've recently had a new election to the land grant board, and so that may get revisited. But because it's unfortunate, because that's one of the best access points into the Camado Falls River Basin and right into the the Trucius Peaks Basin. So more to come on that. I'm looking for an alternate route, and I'm also considering alternate trips like perhaps the Kachina to Wheeler Traverse as on that same day as an alternate trip. So I'll keep you posted on that. Watch for your email. Walking tour of Italy that Bill's leading in late September. Moon of the Hoodoos that Michael Altair and I believe Olivia are now. We've got enough folks for 2 groups for that trip. That looks to be a great trip in late September. Bill's recently listed a llama adventure to Harris Wash in early October, and then the annual Moab Bike Hike and Explore in early November, and then Bluff Hiking Weekend in late November, early December. Again, I invite you to consider leading a trip. Please consider leading 1 trip this year if you haven't. Simple day trips are an easy way to start. No trip is too small. Please contact me if you'd like to talk about options. I'm more than willing to help or assist in any way I can. And without further ado, we'll transition back to Beth for the next part of our program. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, I apologize for those of you that have heard this so many times now, but I want to make sure everybody at home is hearing and seeing everything okay on their end. So just a few logistics for the presentation before we get started. Our presenter will be taking questions via Zoom chat and from our in-person audience. So for those of you watching from home, you can find the chat feature in the Zoom app menu bar. Type your questions to the person that says Peak Moderator, and it has my name, Beth, in parentheses, in the chat window anytime during the talk, and I'll read them at the end during the Q&A session for our presenter to answer. Please remember that not everyone in the room here with us can have a microphone on them, so there's just a bit of a delay when we're listening to questions from the live audience. Don't worry, we'll be back on in a second, and we'll repeat that question for everyone to hear. Okay, so I'll pass it along to Juliana to introduce our speaker for tonight.
Okay, so thanks, Beth. Okay, there we go. So I'm Juliana Fessenden, and I'm the program chair for the club, and that means I find very good speakers to speak. And today we've got Deniece Korzekwa, who's going to talk about bicycle adventures around the world. But as I'm just going to do a little bit. But as Tony mentioned, we are looking for 10-minute talks in December for our potpourri. And so if you got ideas, please let me know. I should probably give you my email, but you could talk to me after the talk if you've got ideas. And we're also looking for next year's talks. We run our program the 4th Tuesday of the month. And we have an open calendar except for February. And so if you're interested and you've got adventures with lots of good pictures that you would like to share, please talk to me after the talk as well. So now I will get out of Denice's way and show you how to advance. And I'll sit down.
Okay, thank you. Just have a clock here so I don't go over time. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate seeing all of you in the audience, and I hope you at home will enjoy the talk too. So we have, the bicycle adventures around the world. Originally, I was asked to talk about a particular trip we did a year ago in Patagonia, and my thought was, wow, out of all my trips I've done, that isn't my favorite. I would like to talk about something else. And then when I started looking, I thought, maybe I should make a little bit more of a potpourri about the places we've been, and give everybody an idea. So here's a picture of the globe. The places of the stars are the 12 sites that we've been that are actually kind of organized trips. We do a lot of cycling around, but these are organized trips. And so we've been to lots of different places and seen lots of different things. So here's an overview of the talk. I'll talk about the motivation of why one might want to go on a trip. Then I'll talk about our first trip, which was in New Zealand. Then some about self-guided trips versus group-supported trips. The one in Tanzania, a little bit of South America, and then some miscellaneous ones about the others. So in spite of the fact we've done 12, I'm not going to talk about all 12. So why would one want to do a trip like this? Well, it's an active outdoors vacation, and I think everybody here can appreciate why one might want to go do an active outdoors vacation. I feel like you get a sense of adventure compared to your typical daily controlled lives. And I know for a lot of people, especially maybe those of us that work in a highly structured area like the laboratory, even a little bit might seem like an adventure. You get to know the location up close and personal, and that's what I really like about cycling versus going off on a bus tour or in a car. The other thing, it's faster than walking. So if you were going to do a walking tour, that's great, but you can't see that much. So a bicycle is kind of a nice compromise. You can explore the scenery and the culture. What I really like is being able to see the people, see the town, see the culture, and get a feeling for how other people live. You can ride the route less traveled. That is also then not really possible in a car, so you can go on lots of paths that aren't available. And then the final one I had is you can see everything a destination has to offer at your own pace. And this is, instead of being on a guided bus tour, everyone says you have 1 hour to go visit these 5 tourist shops. You can maybe go somewhere else and look around and see things you like. So the trips we've done, the 12, we're on 6 continents over the past 18 years. We have guided supported ones, also self-guided ones. We use 7 different cycle tour companies, so I can tell you a little bit about those if you're interested. They were anywhere from 4 days to 2 weeks, and in reality, the 4-day one was one we did on our own. All the rest of them were at least a week long. Most trips we've rented bicycles, so if you are interested in that, we can talk about it. We only had 1 trip where we took our own bicycles. So we bring along our own saddles, cycling shoes, helmets, and pedals. So if you're used to riding that, at least then the rented bike starts to feel a little bit more like your own. And then we have also then, just as kind of a caveat for cycling, is that we have rented bicycles in lots of different places and done day rides, which is also a really fun thing to do that I know some of the rest of you have done as well. Okay, so how do we get started? So back in 2005, it's our 25th wedding anniversary, and we decided we should do a fun trip. And so we were trying to figure out what to do, and Dave, my husband, who I forgot to introduce there, he is a big cyclist. He cycles all the time. I hadn't been cycling for years. I used to cycle, and then I had taken some time off, but I thought, well, that sounds kind of fun. Let's do a cycling trip. So we found one on the South Island of New Zealand. It was 2 weeks. It started and ended in Christchurch. We ended up then, we get there, and there's only 5 of us. There's me and Dave, this man from Germany, and 2 guides. So how can you go wrong with that? One of the fun things is we stayed in lots of different places, farm stays, hotels, hostels, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We had most meals and snacks. We rode lots of different types of road, and we did have some long driving transfers. And this is one of the features of a guided supported trip, is that you can see much more of the area because someone can drive you from this interesting place to that one. If you're completely on your own, then you're completely on your own, and so you can only go so far. So I knew that there was going to be a lot of climbing because they told us, but I had sort of thought I got in really good shape to go on this trip, and boy, the hills really did me in. And part of it was because they're not hills that are really made for anything except for, they were like power line support highways, super steep, they're kind of rocky. They were hard to ride, and you can maybe tell on the lower right one, people are walking their bikes up the hill. The one that was going up along the power lines was certainly a challenge. But we got to chase sheep, which I learned how to chase sheep on the bicycle. I was riding up and I'd get kind of close and they wouldn't do anything, and I'd back off and I'd get land close. Well, it turns out what you really have to do is just kamikaze and pedal really, really hard, and then all the sheep spread away. So, but then the problem is, you might imagine you might get certain things flying in your face, when you're going through there that aren't the best. But we also rode in rain and wind. We had some snow, which changed one of our days, and we crossed a lot of water. So I put those 3 pictures along the bottom to just show you that in the beginning, everybody else is bombing through the water like there's nothing, and I am walking through the water. But by the end of the trip, I rode through that water. So the roads and trails were really interesting and variable. You can see we rode on pavement, we rode on dirt, we had some trails, we got to cross different bridges. The lower left one I just thought was a super funny sign, if you can see it, about when it's frosty, your wheels go all over. But it also isn't that high of a pass. That particular pass was only 564 meters, so it wasn't like it was a tremendous pass, but we'd been so worried about it because they put in their thing about, you have to you know, climb this steep pass. And then when we got there, it was actually pretty accessible. We stayed in a variety of places, and this is part of the thing I liked. So the farm stays, we would actually go to these people's sheep farm. You'd stay in their house, they'd make dinner, you'd eat at their dinner table, and then we sat around and we watched women's netball, because we're in New Zealand, as our activity in the evening. So it was super fun to figure out what they liked to do, how they lived, what kind of things were important to them. And then, you know, the one on the lower left is a pub. We got there and they were having a wedding, and so they had moved us to stay in a different place, but we had to go to the wedding area to eat. Well, they were all watching, well, I can't remember what kind of sports on TV, but they were rugby. Okay. So they were super friendly and let us come in. It's like we're part of the wedding party. You know, it was a lot of fun. But they have beautiful, beautiful scenery. One of the things I was really impressed by is the incredible vistas. You know, they have very tall mountains that they do skiing on during the winter, or you can ride up the steep hills during the summer. You know, lots of water, which is always fun for me because I grew up in Colorado, which is like this, the land of no water. So it's always fun to see water. Great vistas. And here's another picture of the things we were able to see. The lower left is Queenstown, which is a major city. We stayed there one extra night and were able to tour around. The western side of the island, then when we got there, was much greener. You know, they have a glacier there that is kind of like glaciers everywhere. It's receding, but it was fun to go see. And it was fun to see the water and the ferns, and we took some hikes instead of just always biking. Oh, we also then, one of the things about the trips is that you get to see other things besides just cycling. And so the attractions we were able to see was bungee jumping. So they claim to be the place that invented bungee jumping. So we looked at that. The one on the upper right then is where they filmed a lot of the Lord of the Rings. And at the time we were there, Lord of the Rings had come out about 2 years before that. So they had all kinds of signs of go visit the Lord of the Rings sites. And then, you know, we did see some nice animal water life, dolphins and seals, and that was fun. So, you know, we really enjoyed the trip, and we thought this was really a fun thing to do. So we thought maybe we'd explore other ways to do it. I don't know if you can read the sign on the upper left one, but it says back to reality. And and you can see where we're going. I'm not sure that's reality or not, but it was fun. So then we said, well, why don't we try a self-guided bike tour? So in spite of the fact that we didn't have a huge group, we did have a guide. You know, we were somewhat constrained, and we thought, well, it would be really fun to do a self-guided one. So on a self-guided one, some of the differences are you are given, someone has arranged for hotels, and they've arranged a route that you go, and you need to get yourself from this hotel to that hotel, and they take your luggage, which is great because then all you have to do is worry about getting you and your bicycle and the stuff you're with every day. Unlike the one supported tours, you may have to buy a lot more of your food. So if you're looking at doing a self-guided tour, you probably have to budget in some more money for food than maybe on a guided tour. You need to carry everything with you that you will need during the day. On this particular trip, we went with my sister and her boyfriend, and we knew we needed to cross the border from Germany into Austria. And they said, bring your passport because you're going to have to cross this border. Well, she forgot her passport in her luggage. So we spent the whole darn day worrying about this whole passport thing, and I will show you the passport check. Turns out it wasn't a worry, but you do need to bring everything with you. And the trip is more self-paced and flexible than maybe a guided tour. So, you know, if you say, man, this is the most interesting site, I want to stay here for 2 hours, you can do this. All you have to do is make sure that you get to the next place, you know, you need to go. And so that can be part of the fun. So that's a list of the self-guided tours we've done. And I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I am going to talk about the first one in the Czech Republic. So the first one is in the Czech Republic, and you can see there we went from Prague back all the way down to Passau, and then we took a van back up to Prague, and that's where we flew in and out of. It was 7 days, mostly along the Vltava River, about 200 miles, not much climbing. It was really pretty easy. It was a German tour company, which turned out to be kind of a funny difference of that in the Czech Republic, then they speak Czech. And then since it was a German company, they picked hotels where the people spoke German. So we get there and now we're, you know, can speak either Czech or German. And my German is not that good, but we did manage to get around. So, and Central Europe has an incredible array of excellent cycling trails. They're all over, they're well marked. There's really a lot of nice things you can do either on your own or with a company. So we arrived at our first hotel and we found our bicycles, and you can see them there. They weren't really at all what we expected. I don't know if you can tell, but they're kind of, what someone might call, sort of a granny bike. You sit up, you look kind of funny riding around. One of the things I thought was sort of humorous is they were low on air. There wasn't a pump with them. So we went to the sporting goods store to buy a bicycle pump. And there they had those inline rollerblades from New Mexico. And that's what they say on them is New Mexico. So it was sort of a funny side. So, like I said, the bike paths are beautiful. You can see, sort of a variety there. You can bike with nuclear reactors in the background. And then, the directions said, now remember, this is 18 years ago. The directions said to follow this route and this, the little green arrows. And as you can see, sometimes it was a little bit confusing. And the first day we rode at least 2 kilometers out of the way before we figured out we had turned the wrong way. We were supposed to go the other arrow and came back. This is something that, I'll kind of reiterate at the end, but has really changed over the past 18 years, is how to find your way around and directions and how easy it is now compared to the way it used to be. But we also had time to visit the sites. I thought this particular castle was interesting since it used to be up on a high cliff, for security. And then when they made a dam, the water is right up there. So you go out and it's like, you just have the seaside sitting. But it was kind of fun to be able to stop at these different sites and visit. This is also kind of a beer tour if you're interested in beer. We stayed one night in Budweis, which is where the original Budweiser comes from, and lots of the other places had beer. So every pub will have some brand of beer, and they'll have a light and a dark, and that's what they'll serve. So whatever they're choosing to use, and it may be the one of the city, you'll have 2 choices. So whether it was, whether you knew German or not, you could figure out how to say light or dark and figure out what kind of beer you wanted. So the scenery was really beautiful and varied. We got to ride along the river, like I said, the Vltava mostly. You get to see lots of old castles. One of the nice things about being along a river is originally that's where all the commerce was done. So they have things really right on the river. And rivers are really a beautiful way to see cities in Europe. So this is when we went to go into Austria. The path became unpaved. The border crossing turns out was uneventful. So it's that little hut in the lower right. There was nobody there. We didn't have to worry about it. There was a lot, much ado about nothing. One of the other things I thought I'd mention is just something to think about for bike trips is that along one of these railroad crossings, if you ride your bike, you need to be careful of railroad crossings that your tires don't slip in. Well, I wasn't being very careful. It was rainy. It was a little bit slippery. So my tires slipped in, my bike went one way, I went the other way, my clip didn't come out, and I sprained my ankle. So I'm sitting there thinking, now what? I'm thinking we still have 3 days of the trip. What are we going to do? Luckily for me, I could ride a bike even though I couldn't walk because I wasn't putting enough weight on my ankle. But one of the things about it is that they do give you numbers to call if you need help. But we've done this before. We've tried to call a taxi. Well, the taxi has to carry you and your bike. And a lot of taxis, especially in Europe, are not very big. So it's hard to find something that'll take your bike as well. So we arrived along the Danube River. We also needed to cross that. Here's a picture of the ferry crossing. And it was also kind of funny in that you could ring that bell, and then the dog across the water would hear it, the dog would bark, and then the people would know to come and get you. So it was a very efficient system. And then the bottom right one is a picture of Passau, Germany. That's where we ended. And then we took a van back. So self-guided tours I really enjoy because of this self-pacedness. You can kind of do what you want, but there are some disadvantages that I'll try to catch during the rest of it. All right. So what I really thought is our biggest adventure cycling tour, and if I was going to pick one to talk about, was the one to Tanzania in Africa. So this one was a guided trip. It was 2 weeks. We ended up with, once again, not very many of us. We had a Swiss guide, a Tanzanian driver, a Tanzanian cook, and 5 tourists. So of the 5 tourists, there was me and Dave and our friend Phil Tubasing, who many of you may know. He's done a lot of trips with us. And then these 2 men from New Zealand. And the 2 men from New Zealand were friends of the guy who owned the tour company, and he had somehow talked them into coming on this trip. So the kind of the logistics were we flew into Nairobi, which is, here on the map. And then we drove here for a safari, which is, you know, a general safari. Then we rode around Kilimanjaro, took a transfer fairly close, and then rode down into the ocean. We didn't ride into the ocean. We rode to the ocean. So we flew to Nairobi, like I said, and we spent a day touring. One of the things that I thought was an interesting thing is malaria is a big health concern there. So for us, we took anti-malarial medication. We soaked our clothes in permethrin. If you've ever done that, it's a chemical you soak your clothes in and then you just let them dry. And then they are really, really repellent to insects. I was really astonished how well they worked. And we used insect repellent on the areas that were not covered by clothes, and every single bed we had a net. And the people who live there, I think just a lot of them get malaria, unfortunately. And I know that our driver, his wife had died from malaria. You know, there was some interesting things with that. Okay, so at first we went and we did a safari in Tanzania. We did the Ngorongoro Conservation Area and then Lake Manyara National Park. We stayed at this nature campsite lodge in between there, and it literally is a tent with some cots in it, and then you go down, you know, the walkway to find your restroom. But it was the safari was really pretty amazing. My first thought was, oh, a safari. Part of it is I kind of in my mind think of safaris as hunting as opposed to viewing animals, but it really was very impressive. So our driver had this vehicle that you can see, and then he'd open the top and we could stand up and look at the animals then when we were driving around. So this is at the Ngorongoro Park, and you can see we saw baboons and hippos and zebras, and we actually saw lots of other animals, but I didn't want to put them all in here. This is the Lake Manyara part where we had really a pretty amazing view of elephants. I don't know if you can tell how close we are there, but at some point we thought the elephants were actually going to charge on the vehicle, and he had us all kind of duck down below and sit down, but luckily they turned and went the other way. So after that, then we started the bike trip, you know, in general. So on the upper right is the children there are just very, very curious, very, very friendly. And so everybody else was getting the bikes together, I had a little, you know, tablet that I was taking their pictures with and then showing them their pictures. And so they really, really loved that, and they wanted to do different things so that they could see their picture on the tablet. And we started riding off, and we went to Camel Camp. So Camel Camp was more luxurious than the last one because it had an ensuite bathroom, and you can see here that, you know, there I'm taking a shower. There's a bucket of warm water here that goes down, and then there's a toilet, and our tent is right there. We didn't have to walk very far. So one of the things that was a little bit unfortunate about this, and it's somewhat of my thoughts about being prepared for these, is we got our bicycles, and a couple of the bicycles really were not in very good shape, and they needed a fair amount of work. So we managed to ride, I don't know, it was 9 kilometers or something here. It wasn't very far, but in the morning we needed to fix them. And the man who was doing the tour, normally he brings a bike mechanic with him. Well, because it was such a small group, he decided not to, but he didn't have any tools. He had no idea how to fix the bikes. So luckily Dave and Phil had a few tools with them and were able to fix the bikes to make them at least rideable till we got to another town where they did have a bike mechanic. But the other thing about this trip is that Tanzania is pretty close to the equator. So, you know, the days and the nights are about the same. So it would get dark fairly early, and then we would be using lanterns or flashlights. So we couldn't do anything at night, and we had to wait until the morning to fix them. But that became kind of an issue for many things, was the daylight. So the first part of it is kind of dry, you know, and you can see we're riding around in really pretty barren places. The lower left is our cook made just amazing meals. He just felt it was his job that at lunch every day we had to have a hot meal that he cooked. So he would kind of drive ahead of us and he'd get it all ready and we could get there, and they were really lovely. And then we stayed that night at a camp that was considered a luxury camp, and it's one of the base camps for people who are going to climb Kilimanjaro. So it's where they start there and somewhat get acclimated. So it's about 6,000 feet. You know, which for us would seem normal, but at least for some people, it helps them get acclimated to where they're going. We rode through a lot of villages. I found the Maasai villages to be particularly interesting, but one of the things I liked about them, and I felt was a little bit odd, is we get to the village, and as we're coming into it, all the people are standing outside. all ready to greet us. And I guess it's quite unusual to find a woman riding a bicycle, because I'd ride through and they'd say, "Jumbo, mama, jumbo." And then, they'd run along. Well, it turns out they have cell phones. And this is even way back then. They may not have electricity. They may not have running water, but they have a cell phone that they charge with a solar battery, or at least one or two within the town. And it was quite nice. I found the people to be very, very friendly. So then the next night we stayed in a school. We camped. So in the lower left, you can maybe see tents in the background. We camped there, and it's a school where kids go. Our sort of bathroom was on there on the right. So, you can stand on those two little planks and use the hole in the ground. And then for a shower, we had the green bucket that they heated water for us so we could use it to dump over our heads. But there were a number of kids who go to school there, and that's all they have for school. The other thing is they really liked the bicycles, so they took turns riding our bicycles around. But then because of the sunset, we didn't have any electricity and we were trying to heat it inside. So the one on the upper left is what it looked like without a flash. And then if you turn the flash on, you can see what he's actually doing for cooking. And then this is one of the school rooms on the lower left. They're pretty dingy. I guess it's good to have some sort of education, but they are really a fairly poor people. And then we were able to see Kilimanjaro, and that was the only time it was actually above the clouds or out of the clouds so that we could see it. But it became more green. This just gives you an idea of sort of what some of the paths look like. We went through some banana fields. There were a lot of, cows around. That bridge had washed out on the upper left, so we had to go through it. But it was really, really fun, cycling. Then we ended up staying in this other tent lodge, and they said, well, there's this watering hole out there and the elephants might come. And I thought, oh yeah, right. So I got up in the morning, and they indeed did. So in the first one in the upper left, you can see a few elephants. And then by the time, they were all there, there was a huge amount more. And then the one on the lower right, you can see they're starting to walk away. And that was really fun because it was just really right outside the place where we were staying. So then at this point, we took a transfer to go out of the mountainous area into the Usambara Mountains, and we started here. So if you remember that map in the very beginning, I don't know what it was, maybe a couple 100 miles that we needed to be driven. And then once we got there was, of course, this amazing view that you can see on the upper right there that was just out of the hotel room we were at. But as another thing is that the van we were taking broke down, and the guy says, well, I'll put in a phone call and someone will come in a few hours and pick us up and take you along the way. But luckily, Dave and Phil came to the rescue again, and it was a broken radiator hose. And so they, cut off the split part, pushed it back on, used a screwdriver to put the hose clamp back on, put our water bottles in it for more water, and we were able to go. But it was interesting how they seemed more than happy just to let us sit there. I'm sure we would have lost a whole day had they not been able to fix it. So when we got into the Usambara Mountains, we saw a lot more people. There were more cities, but it was really, really amazing to watch people carry items. The people who had bicycles in general used them to haul something. And they would walk up the hill like this, hauling it. And then sometimes going down the hill, they could hop on the seat and coast down. Or they would have like 5 people on the bicycle going down the hill. They were really amazing. And then watching people, women especially, carry things on their head is just amazing. And at the lower left one, you can see the women are carrying these huge branches. I don't know what that must weigh. Or the people who are carrying this, and their hands are free. But I don't think I have any pictures here, but we have some pictures before of very young girls learning to do this, and they carry water usually. Laundry day I thought looked especially tough, so I don't know if you can tell, but down in the bottom there, the women are doing laundry, in the river, and they're actually waving at us up there. They seemed quite excited. So there were a lot more cities and established towns. So the upper left is a hardware store, and the lower right is like a cattle auction. They're selling cattle, and the way they would do it is that you would actually bid on the rope for the cow, and then you would get the cow that went along with it. And I'm sure they figured it all out, but it was kind of a funny thing. In the upper right are then the men. So at least the feeling by our 2 guides, who are Tanzanian, is that the women do all the work and the men sit around and are very lazy. And from what we saw, there was quite a lot of that, And, you know, one of the things is I also appreciated is we saw a lot of really innovative things that people made. So the one on the left is some kids have made these little cars that have steering wheels that they play with. The one in the middle is some seats made out of tires, and they've woven them together. And the one on the right is a grinder that they've made out of a bicycle to sharpen tools and stuff. So they are, it is really beautiful in the Usambara Mountains, very different from the area around Kilimanjaro. Very green, a lot more farming. They farmed coffee and tea. Then we stayed in the most interesting places. The one on the tops is run by a German family, and it was set up with these amazing gardens and very beautiful. A real change of pace from where we'd been staying. And then the bottom was a convent. So we stayed at the convent, and we drank all of the beer they had, unfortunately. So I'm not sure what they were doing after that. So at the very end, then we went to the, if you get all the way down to the coast, is a town called Pangani, and we stayed in a tent lodge there run by an expat from the U.S. And her goal was to train young Tanzanians to work in the service industry. So they came there and worked, and they were really, really hardworking. Anything you wanted, you know, they would do for you. But they were learning English. They were learning, you know, customs or sort of Westerners, so that they could go work in hotels and other places. And get good jobs as opposed to staying at home. So we left our driver and our cook, and I just thought these were kind of funny, is that they told us we were going to take a boat across to Zanzibar, but they forgot to tell us there weren't any docks. So, you know, I was wearing long pants, you know, trying to pull my pants up so they don't get all wet, but it was kind of a fun transfer. So I really, really enjoyed that trip. I thought it had quite a lot of adventure. I got to see what was going on. And I thought the experience overall was really excellent. And even kind of going over the adversity of fixing your bicycles and the cars and everything makes it what is part of the whole experience and fun. So anyway, moving on. So South America, we've done 2 different trips, and you can see where they are. They're in the southern part. The first one we did was the top one. And we went from Puerto Montt kind of up. And then the next one was the Patagonian one that we did about a year ago, going south. And so the first one, they were both guided tours. They're both by a company called Saddle Skedaddle, which I very much recommend for anybody that wants to do trips. They're out of the UK, so they tend to be very English oriented. You don't have to worry so much about language. But when we've gone, we've always gone with other people without having a whole lot of people from the US there. So you do still get to interact with others. Oh, let's see. So I called the first one the Volcanoes Tour because the mountain Puyehu erupted 7 months before we got there, and it spewed ash onto everything, and I'll show you some pictures in a bit. But we got to see lots of really nice volcanoes. I didn't realize that South America had so many, or in Chile is where a lot of these are. And you can see then on the map here, these sort of 4-pointed stars are different volcanoes that we are going around. The red are places we stayed, and the blue is where we crossed the border from Chile on the left into Argentina on the right. So we took a ferry, which there were a lot of ferry rides because that's the only way you can get around for some of this. So on a typical day, we had some beautiful riding. We would stop for snacks. We'd have lunch, and we'd have a nice place to stay. This particular trip was the one that had 13 guests, a driver, and a cook. So they were really completely to capacity. We were in a van, and all 15 of us were there, and then we were pulling a trailer with the bikes. So you can see that we had lots of volcanoes to ride around. You know, it's very pleasant, really nice riding. It wasn't horribly steep. This is a picture then of the ash. So you can see the ash is still coming out of this volcano even 7 months later. And then this, which looks like snow on top of everything, is actually ash. So the backs of all the cows had ash sitting on them, you know, the plants. And then the 2 on the bottom are showing lakes. And part of the problem with the ash is it's very light, so it floats on top. And then the sun can't get down into the water. So it kills the fish, it kills the plants. There's a lot of problems with it. So on the land, they use snow plows to move all of the ash around and clear things, but the lakes were really quite a problem. I think they tried various things to clear them, but nothing worked particularly well. Then we had a day where we climbed one of the volcanoes, and this was really quite fun for us because I think the top of the volcano was only 9,000 feet. So, you know, where other people were huffing and puffing to the altitude, we were like, well, yeah, this is really nothing. But I put this in just to show you, number one, it's a huge tourist site. So you can see all the people going up there. The other one is, I don't know if you can tell, but, you know, you give all of these people an ice axe, and then you say, hey, let's all go climb the mountain. And something that we would never do in the US. Or you can see here on the upper right, people are that close, there's nothing around to keep someone from falling in. The fun thing about it is after you got all the way to the top and you came back down, they gave you these little, I don't know, pads or something you tie around your waist, and then you would slide down just on your bum, stopping yourself with the ice axe. So when Tanya was talking last month, for those of you who were here and they were talking about sliding down that snow, it was kind of like that, but we had an ice axe that we could kind of control our speed with. So we had beautiful, beautiful views, beautiful roads. This was really a fun trip. I enjoyed this trip a lot. The next one is the one that we did just last November, so not quite a year ago. And this one I'm calling the Water and Climbs Tour because it rained a lot. And, you know, for as much as I complained about the rain for the people who've talked to me about this, this is the only trip out of all 12 that we had a lot of rain, so I shouldn't complain. We've had just amazing weather for most of it. But this one is interesting in that the highway we went along is a major highway that was built between 1976 and 2000. And it was trying to connect all this area here to the mainland, because otherwise there was no road at all. And you could either go out into the water and take a ferry or some kind of way to get up there, or you could go into Argentina and drive up and then cross over somewhere. So this is a way to connect a lot of the people, even though it was only connecting about 100,000 people. And then Coyoque is here, and so it was a major city, or it is a major city that was connected by that. So one of the things is that in order to make a highway like that, there are some places where you still have to take a ferry because there's no way to put a road in. And so the first ferry crossing we took was a pretty major one, and we met a whole lot of people that you can see on the left there that were doing the whole thing all the way down the country of Chile, starting in Peru and going all the way down. And these people were doing bike packing, so they had everything on their bicycles, and that's what they had, and they would stay in parks. Most of them did not have much money. And for as much as I complained about the rain, all I thought of was these poor people in their tents that are getting doused with rain. And then the next morning they pack up their nice wet tent and sleeping bag and they ride again. And most they hope for is finding a covered place to sleep if they can find one. But it was real interesting to talk to them. They were taking, lots of time, like up to a year to do the. But most of the highways still unpaved, so we rode on a lot of dirt roads, but they were, depending on where you were, they were really quite varied and different. Luckily, we were on pavement for most of the rainy days, so we weren't having to ride through a whole lot of mud. And you can see that we had, different views. They have also put in a lot of amazing bridges, because if you can imagine how much water is there, there's a lot of water to cross, and all the bridges were really very well built, and most of the bridges were paved. So even if you were on a dirt road, you would be on a paved bridge. So some of the sections could become dangerous, and this particular one is a well-known cycling ride that you ride up this hill, and it has 21 switchbacks, and it's fairly steep, and people look forward to doing it as a climb that you do, and you say, yeah, I did that climb. Well, it was raining that day, and we put off leaving, even though we knew we were going to drive, to try to wait till the rain came down. But I don't know if you can tell from the picture, the one on the left, there's some motorcycles there. This is taken from inside the vehicle, that were going through water that was, when they would go through, it'd be up to their waists on the motorcycle, and you can see it running down the side. And they were talking about closing the road, and we were saying, well, good thing we made it through, because otherwise we'd be stuck. And they said, oh no, this is such an important highway, they would probably have it open in 24 hours after it stopped raining, because they have to keep it open. But there was a lot of water there. I was pretty impressed. But there's very low traffic. And so these pictures I put on here, one to show that, you know, there could be cows there. And you probably notice on these other pictures that, you know, we're all standing in the middle of the road because a car coming by was an unusual event. And we didn't really need to move very often. So it is pretty unpopulated still and makes for lovely riding. We had a rest day in the town of Coyhaique, and one of the fun things that was happening is the Men's World Cup soccer was going on. And so for all of our nationalities, we, at least in the beginning, each had a team there. So we would try to watch the games together, and that was kind of a fun thing. And then when your team lost, then you would pick somebody else's team to root for. And finally, the guy from England was the one who ended up staying in the longest. But the lower left one is Phil, our friend, and we're in a pub that is in Coyhaique. And I don't know if you can tell, but there are soccer jerseys from all over the world, all over the walls and all over the ceiling. And so it was kind of a fun place to go. And I put on every slide, they have beautiful scenery because, you know, there's beautiful scenery all over the world. And you can see on the picture on the right what a lot of the roadway looked like then. You can see it going off into the distance. So as we traveled south on this trip, it did become drier and more rocky and arid. So you can kind of get an idea of what it was like. This particular road, the one on the lower right here, was really quite a beautiful road with a cliff on the side, and the water was going right next to it. And you could see, I don't know if it was a fjord or a lake. That was one of the things that was kind of funny about this, is you'd be by this big body of water, and it would be hard to tell whether it was a lake or it was the ocean. And in one place, you go around a lake, and then there's probably about a mile wide piece of land, and then the next body of the water is the ocean, but it all kind of looks the same in these fjords. So at the end of the trip, normally we would have gone across a lake on a ferry to get back to where we had to leave from the airport, but the ferry was broken, and so they decided that what we needed to do was go into Argentina and go around. Let me see, I might just try to pull up the map real quick because it might make it clearer. Oh, it's not a very, well, I'll try to do it. So we rode to here, to this yellow spot here at the bottom, and normally we would just take this ferry and then catch a road going back, because the Highway 7 ends right here and keeps going south, but we had diverted over. So since it was broken, we decided the best way to do would be to go here and around rather than going all the way back that way. So when we got to the border, then they filled out a whole bunch of paper that we could go, but they wouldn't let us take the bicycles because they were worried about bicycle smuggling. So I know. So what happened is the driver went and drove the bicycle, was going to drive him back to a town, drop off the bicycle trailer, and then come back and pick us up. So we walked across the border, which was kind of funny. And then we found a pub there that had World Cup on it, so we watched the game, you know, and then went on. But then when we were coming on our way back around, we ran into this roadblock, and we were looking at, I don't know if you can see, but what's happened is the guy, I think, tried to turn around in the middle of the road and got high centered. So he's stuck on the bottom there of what to do. You know, we were looking at this thinking, all right, how do you get out of this? Because it's not a matter of just getting a tow. Since he's high centered, you know what he was going to do. Luckily, there was enough room on the side that we could drive around the outside and not get stuck. Because we're looking at this thinking, okay, now we're all going to miss our flights, and you know, and what's going to happen? Okay, so there we go. All right, so the next, I hope you're not all sleeping yet, but there's two more trips I would like to highlight, and these are also some of my favorites, and they're a little bit different. So the next one was in Norway, and it was a self-guided trip, but it was one that had some other people with it. So everybody was doing the self-guided trip on their own, but we were all kind of together. So we'd stay at the same hotel every night, and they wanted us to eat dinner together every night, which was fun to get to know them. We had a little bit of a discussion of the people from Spain thought we should eat dinner at 8. We thought we should eat dinner at 6, and we compromised on eating dinner at 7. But it was fun. And kind of like in Patagonia, they've built these amazing highways. So if you don't know much about Norway, in the 60s, They discovered oil in the Arctic Ocean and got a lot of money. And they've used a huge amount of money to improve infrastructure. And so they have lots of great roads. They have bridges. They love tunnels. If you go to Tromsø, where you start here, they have they built some tunnels through this hill so that you don't have to go over the hill, especially in the winter. And right in the middle of it is a roundabout. So they have a tunnel that goes this way and a tunnel goes that way, and then a roundabout in the middle of it. And it's really, you know, I really appreciate countries that use their money to improve infrastructure and things for everybody. And Norway is definitely that way. So this route then also has tunnels, and it has ferries that you have to do, and it was quite fun. So this one, then, we're all north of the Arctic Circle, so we're in the land of the midnight sun, and so kind of the opposite of it getting too dark. It was really, really light all the time, which was kind of nice. One of the downsides is that then the birds, since it never gets dark, they never get quiet. So the birds are sitting there making noise and nesting and doing all kinds of things, you know, 24 hours a day. All right. So this is just an overview picture that we put in there to show we stayed at this place right here, but in order to get there, we rode, and then you go between this little island and that little island and that little island across the bridge. And most of the climbing we did on this trip was actually bridges. So they've made the bridges very, very steep and tall so that a ship can get under it, but it doesn't take up too much space. And the, you know, it wasn't that you couldn't bike up them, but they were kind of narrow, and they'd often have a little sidewalk off to the side that was maybe, you know, enough for a person to walk on. So if you're really good on your bike and your handlebars aren't too wide, you could maybe ride on the sidewalk, or you could ride in the road and then hope that there weren't any cars, which for most of the stuff out here, there were no cars, there weren't any problems. But it was really beautiful. So we stayed at the place down there and then walked up to the top of this mountain to take these photos. So I mentioned having tunnels, and so the longest tunnel we did on this trip was 2 kilometers long, and my first thought was, oh man, that seems kind of scary. But they're very smart here. What they have is, if we zoomed in, there's a little sign up here that says bicycle in tunnel, and you go up there when you're ready to go through as a bicycle. First off, they have a little bin there that has reflective yellow vests on, and you can put on your yellow vest, you push the button that says bicycle in tunnel, and then you ride through the tunnel, and then when you get to the other end, you can take off your vest and you leave it in the bucket for the next person going the other way. So people are prepared that there's going to be someone in the tunnel. That's not saying that some of them weren't a little sketchy anyway. Like, I know one of them, all the overhead lights had gone out, and we had headlights on our bike, so it wasn't so bad, but a man came toward us and said that he didn't have any, and I think it curved enough that it got completely black, and he got totally freaked out. But they were really, really quite nice. And then the upper right is a picture waiting for the ferry. So what happens is you're on the road and you go there, and all of a sudden the road ends at the water, and then you get on a ferry and you cross off to the next one. You get off the ferry, it's the same highway number, everything, you just get to ride. You can see on the lower left one, there is a tunnel there, and that's to keep from having to go over that mountain. So that, you know, really does save an awful lot of travel, especially if you imagine in the winter when everything is very snowy and icy. This would be really quite nice to have all these tunnels. And then the lower right is showing one of the bridges that, you know, starts out and then gets quite steep as you go over. So the roadways are really beautifully maintained. The traffic is incredibly nice. We had at one time where the roads, I don't know if you can tell, but they're pretty narrow. I mean, you can see riding on the lower left one, that's how wide the road is. So you really kind of only have one car, and they have to get real careful when they pass. But so we're riding along, and there's a bus of tourists behind me, and I keep waiting for the bus to pass, waiting for the bus to pass. The bus went really, really slow till we got to a place where I could completely pull over, and then they went on. And they really were very polite. And then this restroom, I just thought was really funny. So so they have a lot of beautiful small towns. They're very charming. They're very welcoming. One of the towns, this one on the lower left, you may have seen something in the news a couple years ago about where they decided not to have time anymore in the middle of the summer. They weren't going to keep time because they wanted everybody just to enjoy the daylight, and that's that one. And they are, like in Tromsø, which is the, you know, a big city up there. We flew into there and we stayed overnight, and in spite of the fact it's the middle of summer, lots of tourists, many of the restaurants were closed. And they said the reason why is because it's summertime and they want their people to be able to go out and enjoy it. So they would rather go ahead and have them be closed than, you know, and have their people enjoy it than to have them stay in. Okay. All right. So the last one I'm going to talk about is Japan. And this is one we just did this past April and May. We had wanted to go on a bike and boat tour for a really long time. This has been, you know, one of our goals. And one of the advantages of a bike and boat tour is you can unpack once. You go and during the day, you know, you ride around and then often the boat will go and meet you on the other end. So you can do all this lovely riding around. So we signed up for this one to go to Japan because I've always wanted to go to Japan and bike. And it was supposed to go in June of 2020. Well, as you can imagine, it got postponed and it got postponed until, you know, this April, May of 2023, because that's when Japan finally opened. Well, the other thing that happened is we signed up for a ship that was supposed to have 100 passengers on it, which is way more than I would have signed up for. But I thought, well, this will probably go okay. In the meantime, it became a ship that had 300 passengers on it. It also is run by a company, Santana, which does tandem bicycles. So about half the bikes on there were tandems, you know, so two people are on them. And so it had interesting logistics in terms of getting the bikes on, dealing with so many people. But once you kind of got away from that, it was really a nice trip. But a lot of people brought their own bikes on this one. So in the lower left, you can see there's Dave and my son, and they're putting their bicycles together. And one of the reasons you can kind of do it on this trip is that if you put your bicycle in a bike carrying bag, when you're riding, you have to have some place to have that carrying bag. So if you've gone with a company that's willing to keep it, you know, that works. But if you're going on a trip from here to there, there's got to be a way to get your bike carrying bag there. So that's one of the reasons why it can be complicated to bring your own bike. But yeah, you can see there's a really big area there and lots of people are putting their bikes together, in particular the tandems, because getting a tandem that fits two people have them custom made. So a lot of the tandem riders brought their own bicycle and they put them together. So it was a really different tour. There were 300 cyclists, there were lots of tandems, there were lots of e-bikes, and I'll talk a bit about that later. Many people brought their own bikes. They had the advantages of a cruise that we only had to unpack once. We, in particular, got the best room on the ship because we had, on the old ship, paid a little bit more for the top room. And so they said, well, you already paid that, you know, on this old ship that didn't have very many rooms. You get the best room on the ship, which was kind of nice for us. But the bikes needed to be loaded and unloaded daily, and I'll show you some pictures. This is where the riding's really self-guided. They gave us GPX files, which are very nice. You know, then you can really go off. You don't get lost. You don't have to worry about it. It's really a great way to do it. There was lots of options for how far to ride, where to go, what to see. And, I'll talk a little bit about the different cycling rules. So here's a picture. The one on the top left is showing you some of the bikes. They're all laying on the ground, getting ready to put on the ship. Then when we did it, they did it kind of like a bucket brigade. People would stand here, and then, you know, a bike would pass by, and you just kind of pass the bikes up. So they'd go into the ship, up a spiral staircase, and then onto the top of the ship, where you can see on the lower left where some of the bikes are being stored. So these are the bikes that are non-electric. Because the electric bikes then had to be charged every day. So they went into another area where they had run this really interesting thing of extension cords to plug all of these bikes in. And then on the lower right was just disassembly day on that we had to take all the bikes apart at the end of the time. Oh, this is kind of an aside too. So I don't know if you've been to Japan, but they have incredible number of vending machines. Wherever you go, there's a vending machine. And they sell lots of things to drink. They'll hot and cold. So if you want coffee and it's marked, like you can see on the upper left one, those with red on them say hot, you can get a can and it's going to be hot coffee. They'll have soup, all kinds of things, and they're everywhere. So you can see on the lower right then is something that's called the Coffee Boss, and it was just in the middle of the street there. But that was kind of a nice thing. You didn't have to worry so much about that. But there were just beautiful pathways. Once we got out and did the riding, it was very nice. The man who organized the riding part of the tour is also a U.S. expat who moved there about 20 years ago because he wanted to be able to cycle around and not have to worry so much about different things with the US way of life. He thought the Japanese way of life would be nicer. So he went and scouted out the bike paths, and they really were very nice. The lower left one is a tsunami wall. So they built tsunami walls to keep, flooding from happening, but they're very tall and then very wide, and they're multi-use paths, nicely used. That's our son in the upper right, showing some of the rice paddies, which were all around then, and that was nice to ride by. We got to see lots of different sites along the way you could choose. It happened to be what they call Golden Week in Japan, which is a week that I think they have 3 holidays that happen during the week, and then they give you the holidays of the days in between, so everybody had off from like a Saturday to the whole week to the next Sunday, which means there's lots of people out doing things. There's also lots of festivals, so the lower right one there having some dancers and drummers that were out playing. So the bicycle logistics were really overwhelming. I mean, I did not enjoy riding with 300 other cyclists every day. Part of the problem of getting this bigger ship was that it had to go to a bigger dock. And so the smaller ship would have been able to dock in smaller towns, and this one had to go to bigger cities. So every day we had to start at a city dock and ride out of town before you got into the country areas. It was also weird riding with tandems, and I've not done a lot of riding with tandems, but they just kind of start and stop a little bit different than single riders. They're not quite as, mobile as moving around. And then the e-bikes, which was kind of different, but the Japanese were so welcoming. I guess in my mind, I thought they were really kind of reserved, but they were very welcoming. They seemed to really want to make sure that we all had a great time. We had off of our ship, they came and did welcoming shows. I mean, they would come out with flags and sing songs, and then we'd leave every night. They would do a bon voyage sort of thing. It was really very nice. And then we did have some time in Tokyo, and one of the things I thought was really impressive was this really beautiful Japanese garden right in the middle of downtown Tokyo. So that's the end of the ones I was going to talk about, and these are just a few thoughts that I've had about trips in general is, be prepared. And some of this of being able to fix your bike or fix the car or come up with something if you get injured, being prepared. And it means both with stuff you have, but also kind of mentally prepared that if something goes wrong, try to fix your way around it. Go with the flow. And some of that is every time there's going to be something that doesn't go the way maybe you think it is. And if you're willing to go with the flow, it's things can be a lot happier. Trust yourself. That's maybe more for me personally. There's a lot of these rides that have sometimes been very challenging, and I'm thinking I can't do this. And then when you finally get through it, you feel like, yeah, I really accomplished something. You can feel pleased with yourself. Have a sense of humor. That's also a good one, because some of this stuff you can choose to be mad about it, or you can just say, well, that was going to be a really funny story when I tell it next time. Be innovative, being able to fix the car, fix the bikes. I didn't put a picture in, but on our very first trip, this was 18 years ago, you had to recharge batteries for the camera all the time. You had to download pictures on it. And so we have a picture on the wall where we couldn't get the power adapter to stick in the wall, so we put it all up with Band-Aids, because that was oh, the last one, I haven't mentioned it earlier, but bring along snacks. So one of the things we found, the trips we didn't talk about in Spain and Italy, is they take their siestas, this closing in the middle of the day, really seriously, and they take we're not going to eat until, man, if you come at 7, you're an early bird. And so there can be time when you can't find any food. So if you haven't brought any already, you might sit around being hungry for a few hours saying, when will this place open? Because the grocery store is closed and the restaurant isn't ready to open. And this also happened when we were on we did one in South Dakota, and it was kind of during the pandemic, but we had somebody transfer us up to Deadwood, South Dakota, and we thought, well, we'll go to the grocery store and buy some stuff. Well, the grocery store was closed because they didn't have any employees, and they said, well, go to the dollar store to buy your groceries. And I'm thinking, the dollar store? So we get to the dollar store. Well, they're closed for renovations. So we ended up not buying any groceries then until the next day. But so bring snacks. Now on the guided tours, they probably have lots of snacks. You're probably okay. All right, and then, what has changed over the years? Cell phone coverage, digital communication has changed a lot of things. I mean, you can find maps for everything. You can find GPX files. You can communicate. It's actually really, really easy compared to the way it used to be. Google Translate is also a really amazing thing. When we were in Japan, you know, if you can't figure out what's on the sign, you just hold your phone up and it translates and tells you everything. It's an amazing tool for what you can do. And then the last one I put there was e-bikes. And e-bikes are really an amazing, you know, amazing change to bicycling, and in both good and bad ways. One of the really good ways is if you have people who want to travel together and do this together, and one's an incredible cyclist and the other person isn't, you can kind of equalize a lot of this, and the 2 people can go on the trip, or 5 people can go on the trip, and they can all enjoy it. Another one is, you know, as you get older and you maybe can't do everything, you can still travel. You know, I'm hoping in 10, 15, 20 years, I can still take bicycle vacations, and if I can't ride a completely manual cycle, at least I can find something to ride. Some of the downsides are that then you do get people out cycling who maybe aren't as polite and considerate as others, and they, you know, use their e-bike a little bit more like a motorcycle, and, you know, they're around doing things, and it can be somewhat distracting. But it is, you know, e-bikes have really made a difference on it, on people being able to do things together and enjoy all of this. So I thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Kevin. Thank you. So the question is about the rules of the road in Japan. So we started out the first day, we were riding around and everything's fine. And then we get back to the second day, and the guy who lives there and was making all the routes said, well, there's some rules of the road in Japan. Well, first off, they drive on the left-hand side of the road, so you need to ride on the left side of the road. So if you're going down the left side of the road and you want to make a right-hand turn, like, you know, if you're on here, you'd be making a left-hand turn. You can't just get into traffic and make this right-hand turn. What they want you to do is stop and cross the road on a crosswalk one way, then stop that way, cross the road the other direction, and then get back onto the roadway. So as you can imagine, here we start out in the city, and we're trying to spread ourselves out, but we're still kind of, you know, clumped together. So we get kind of spread out, and then we hit one of these things where instead of taking the turn, we now have to stop the light. Well, then pretty soon the next 25 bicycles are now behind you, and we all do this. We're all clumped up together again, and then we get going. And that was a really hard one to learn. The other thing is they have, you know, some paths that are, some of them are for bicycles and people. Some of them are only for pedestrians. I mean, bicycles are pedestrians, some are only for pedestrians. But if you're over 65, I think it was, or 70, then you are allowed to cycle on that bike, on that path. But we didn't have anybody ever ideas on that. But it was kind of a funny. I'm trying to remember, was there any other ones? It seems like there was another one that I don't remember.
Yeah, the thing is, we also consider that people do expect you to follow.
Yes, so that was the other part, is that the Japanese expect cyclists to follow all the rules. So, you know, for those of you who do ride, things like stopping at a stop sign. You know, there's a lot of cyclists, there's nobody coming, I don't feel like stopping because I don't want to get going again, and they'll kind of breeze right through the stop sign. That is considered incredibly rude in Japan, even if nobody's there. And if there is a stoplight and there is nobody around you, you better darn well wait until that light turns green and before you go. The other thing is they have all their lights timed regardless of where you are. So there's all kinds of lights. You'll sit there for a minute with nothing happening till it changes again. Thank you for that question. I meant to answer that. Yeah. So the question is, how do you keep your bike protected and safe as you're traveling and doing sightseeing? So we carry bike locks. Any of the rental bikes have given us a bike lock that we carry with us. We've never actually had a problem of somebody taking our bicycle. In Japan in particular, they said theft is incredibly uncommon. Their culture is very kind of, it's not a very me culture. It's a much more of a very us culture. So therefore they don't, you know, people stealing something like that would be very uncommon. But we would use bike lane.
The hotels had specific places.
Ah, that, yes. Okay, so that's a fair question.
The guided tours, they would
So at night during if we went to a hotel and on either a self-guided or the guided tours, they would have a place for us to keep our bikes overnight. That's a very good point. Often even in a separate garage or something, so they wouldn't even be in the weather. Are there any online questions?
There is one question online. I think you mentioned, or you answered part of it already, but somebody wants to know what bike did you like the best, or really which saddle did you like the best?
Ah, okay. I liked one bike so much that I came home and bought one like it. And
you talk about the trip, but it was a Sardinia trip.
so, yeah, so we went on a trip to Sardinia and I rented a giant Rome bike. And I thought, man, I really like the way this bike fits. So when I came back, I bought one like it. And then the saddle, I just take the saddle that I use at home. And I had a Terry saddle for people who know it from the Terry company, and I do like that particular saddle. It is kind of nice that even though you're on a rental bike, to be able to use a saddle you're familiar with.
Okay, one more online. Do you use a certain tour company or I guess a tour company?
Okay,
to-
so we have done 4 trips with the company Saddle Skedaddle, and they're out of the UK, and they have trips all over the world, and we've been very pleased with them. They do lots of different types of trips. So I think they have 5 different upper level categories, which would be like road cycling, mountain biking, family cycling, leisure, and adventure. And so we have done both a couple of them are the adventure trips. So the ones to like Patagonia and Lake District are both adventure trips, which means that you're not going to be always staying in a really fancy hotel. You're not going to be riding on always nice roads, and you need to expect a little bit of change out of that. And then we've done a couple leisure cycles, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's super leisurely, but that it's not like all road cycling or all mountain biking. The other thing about it is that all of these cycle trips probably have grading of usually a 1 through 5 on how hard the cycling will be, and you can pay attention to that for what you can do. So one of the things on the Patagonia trip, that was really quite a challenging trip for me. It was a grade 4, and before we've always done kind of 3, maybe 3, 2, 4. In between 3 and 4, but that was actually a grade 4, and that was kind of challenging for me. And a lot of it'll probably seem really silly, but I love climbing, but I don't like going downhill, and because I find it super scary. And so a lot of it was that what goes up has to come down. So I would have trouble on the going down parts. But you should pay attention to the grade. So like Saddle Skedaddle, within that, they have these kind of 5 upper little categories. And then within each of those, they'll have guided and self-guided. And then within that, they'll have grades. And there's lots of different choices of what to do. And other companies will have the same thing. Some of them we picked because we thought, I want to go to Norway. And that was a trip we found in Norway. And it was as opposed to, I'm looking at Saddle Skedaddle, and I'm going to find a trip I want to do within their collection of trips.
Okay, 2 more questions came in online. Oh,
Yeah.
Anybody in the room before I move on? All right. So what was the price range you were looking at, self-guided versus tour guided?
So self-guided, I think you can find anywhere from maybe $1,500 to up to $4,000 if you have a completely guided supported trip for 2 weeks. So some of it'll depend on the amount of time. So I think like the trip to Patagonia that we did, I think it was maybe 4,000. And that included, like I said, most meals, it included the bike rental, transfers. And so the thing it didn't include was airfare. And then on some of them, if you want to do a European trip self-guided, then I think you can find that for more like $1,500. And that's also without airfare. You'd have to pay your own airfare. Dan, you had a question? So the question was, did we use a tour company for the Norway trip and did we like them? Yes, we used a company that was called Wheel to Wheel, and it we found it on Discover Norway website or some.
Wheel to Wheel Discover Norway was the local.
Okay, so Dave corrected me. We booked through Wheel to Wheel, and the tour company was called Discover Norway. And yes, we liked them a lot. They.
Google Discover Norway, you will find the exact same trip.
So Google, if you Google Discover Norway, you can find the exact same trip online. So that one was, one of the nice things about that trip, and an aside, is that, most hotels, you get breakfast with your, with your hotel. That one they had arranged that what you could do is take everything they had for breakfast and pack a lunch. So you would have a lunch with you, and then you would only have to pay something extra for dinner. And the dinners were often, many of them were included because just of where they are. If you go to a place that's really remote, there's nowhere else to eat dinner, so it's included, you kind of get a half board on your hotel fare. So, but I really enjoyed the Norway trip. It's an amazing place to go. Like I said, I kind of like different cultures, and so we did that trip, and then the next winter we went on one to go in the middle of January because I really wanted to see what it was like when it was dark all the time, as opposed to when it was light all the time. And so we went cross-country skiing and we went downhill skiing, so it's kind of fun to do those things in places that have big extremes. Did you have one more online, or?
Yeah, somebody just wants to know what's next. Any more bicycle trips planned? What are you looking forward to?
We have a trip planned for Slovenia in April, and that will be a self-guided trip of about a week long. We're also talking about maybe doing something in January, probably in the southern hemisphere because it'll be winter, maybe in South Africa because we've not been there. I also would really like to do more of Asia. So if you looked at this trip, you can see it's kind of empty out there in Asia. And some of that is political, and some of it is, we just haven't gotten there yet. But that's a fair question. You also might wonder why we never do anything in the US. Well, it's because we really haven't done any, real coordinated bike trips in the US. We did that one in South Dakota, which is where the Star is. Last summer, we did one going up through Idaho and into Canada, where you put we just put the bikes on our car, and then we do riding, and then we drive ourselves to the next place and do different riding, which is also fun.
Okay, if those are all the questions that came in from the viewers and anybody in the room, I just want to say thank you again, Deniece, for sharing your amazing variety of bicycle adventures around the world with us tonight. Everyone, please remember to look out for the quick survey coming to your email. And then like Tony said, it's Bear Month here at Peak, and this week is especially special because this Saturday is our annual Bear Festival from 10 to 2 p.m. Here at the Nature Center. So you can check out our website for more information about the festival and other great programming going on right now. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and have a good night.
Thank you.